directory.
Do you think he should still be in cabinet?
That's not a decision for me to make, Mr. Ginnis.
Okay. It's interesting that you're not saying yes. Do you endorse his conduct as minister?
I can tell you that Mr. Boissonnault's business was never listed on the Indigenous business directory.
To the East Coast, where 17 people have been charged in Labrador last week after RCMP seized a number of illicit drugs and cash in an 11-month investigation they're calling Project Beehive. RCMP say one of the drugs seized is 25 times more potent than fentanyl and new to Labrador. On November 14th and 15th, the RCMP charged 17 people between the ages of 21 and 52 after searching 3 homes in Happy Valley Goose Bay and another one in Chechachi. And for the first time in Labrador, police say they seized a quantity of nitazene, a highly toxic synthetic opioid 25 times stronger than fentanyl. The tablets seized were blue in color and looked like oxycodone pills. Police also seized cocaine, crack cocaine, meth, morphine, heroin, and LSD, as well as $10,000 in cash. So far, 9 people have been arrested. Police are looking for 8 others. The investigation continues, and more charges are expected in the near future. A series of violent incidents, delays in police response times, and the presence of organized crime has a First Nation in Northern Ontario declaring a state of emergency. Leadership from Nedamisegaming, Nishnabeg First Nation, also known as Pic-Mobert, were at the Ontario Legislature today demanding basic safety, security, and access to the same services other communities across the province receive. The First Nation, located roughly 370 kilometers east of Thunder Bay on the north shore of Lake Superior, says drug trafficking by gangs has increased rates of addiction, overdoses, sex trafficking, and violent crime. Leadership also says suicide rates are rising. We will hear from the chief there tomorrow. The members of a First Nation in northwestern Ontario have voted in favor of potentially being the location of a deep geological repository for Canada's nuclear waste. The Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation near Dryden says they have been involved in the decision-making process for 12 years. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization is in the process of selecting a $26 billion site for the project. If it goes ahead, millions of bundles of spent nuclear fuel will be stored in underground rooms and tunnels. The town of Ignace and the municipality of South Bruce voted in favor of hosting the site earlier this year. In a statement, the Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation said this yes vote does not signify approval of the project. Rather, it demonstrates the nation's willingness to enter the next phase of in-depth environmental and technical assessments to determine safety and site suitability. As Anishinaabe, we have shared a sacred relationship with the land, and we have a sacred duty to protect the land for all our relations and for generations yet to come. The Saugeen Ojibwe Nation northeast of Sioux Lookout is the last community in the area that still needs to have input before a site is selected. The project, if approved, has promised jobs and economic development. Meanwhile, those opposed are concerned about the long-term environmental and health impacts, including for the people and wildlife who call home in the area. 11 economic development projects on Manitoulin Island got a multi-million-dollar boost from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. The news from the Minister of Northern Development, Greg Rickford, who announced $4.6 million in funding for everything from $1.6 million in Shishigwanging First Nation for a leadership center to $200,000 for a splash pad in On-Deck Omni Canning. Since 2018, the NOHFC has provided $841 million towards projects in the north, many of which are smaller communities after the government rejigged the criteria.
We wanted to make sure that those investments were targeted at an affordable price. So some communities with populations under 1,500, we can cover up to 90% of the project's cost. It's been a game changer. We still value our big towns and cities and the industries that support them, but we want to make sure our towns, smaller towns and First Nations communities have the same access to enhancing the quality of life in their communities as anyone.
Great. It's much needed because we're in phase 1 in our expansion for our leadership center, and because we're running out of room for our employees, and this will really help a lot.
Other communities and groups that received funding included Gore Bay, Billings, Manitoulin Island Cycling, and Wikwemikong Development Commission. Saskatoon saw its first snowfall of the year last night. And the streets are being cleared, but the city has yet to find a way to help people facing housing insecurity. With cold weather expected to last, the Prairie Harm Reduction Organization has opened its doors to the homeless, but only for the next 7 days. For now, PHR is open 24/7 to warm up anyone in need. The warm-up shelter will be open, but the safe consumption site closes at 5 p.m. PHR hopes to use that space to house more people overnight. Their capacity is 35, but they expect over 100 people each night based on past winters. Kyla DeMong, PHR's executive director, says this is not just a city issue. The province should step in too.
We need the province to step up and properly invest in not just the urban cities, but the rural areas as well, to make sure those services are set up so that people do have a warm place to stay, whether they have a lot of investment in the homeless population or not, or their beliefs around it. It is their responsibility to take care of all the citizens of this province. And they need to make sure that during the winter, there is a safe place to go and that people are not left outside.
PHR currently has no provincial funding or winter support. They've had to add 2 overnight shifts, which will cost around $30,000 from their reserves. The organization is requesting donations of warm clothes, snacks, or cash to help ensure everyone who comes through their doors is supported. Recently, healthcare professionals discussed implementing Indigenous practices within the healthcare system. A panel organized by the Canadian Psychiatric Association hosted the talk in Montreal. As APTN's Savannah Craig reports, some healthcare facilities are already doing this, but can it be expanded across Canada?
Indigenous medicine, Indigenous healing systems are firmly in place, and that they work, and that they need to be part of the treatment and care plan for our people when they come into our system.
Elder Diane Longboat is one of the 3 members invited to speak on the importance of integrating Indigenous practices within Canada's healthcare system at this year's Canadian Psychiatric Association's event.
We do need more work for culturally grounded research and culturally grounded clinical services.
Longboat is Mohawk from 6 nations of the Grand River Territory. She is an elder in the Shakwape-Mukwa Leadership Circle at the Toronto Mental Health Hospital. This is the first centre in Canada to lead a culturally responsive way to provide healthcare for Indigenous people.
And I recommend having a First Nations, Inuit, and Métis standing committee of the board.
Longboat said institutions should not wait on governments to implement better healthcare for Indigenous patients.
They have not taken seriously the stories of our people. They have not taken seriously the mental health and addiction challenges that have been a direct result of government policy. And so until the Government of Canada and the provincial governments take the voices of our people seriously, we will continue to see so many of our people suffering from inadequate housing, poor education, poor access to mental health care.
Panelist Dr. Jason Pennington is a member of the Huron-Wendat Nation and a surgeon at the Scarborough Health Network.
The impacts of colonialism, racism, social exclusion, Those are the things that have happened to Indigenous people. And until we address those basic needs, we will never attain health equity with the rest of the Canadian population.
He identified 3 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to actions that need to be implemented. The calls to action he identified include increasing the representation of Indigenous people within the healthcare profession and requiring students in the medical field to undergo Indigenous-centered training.
The healthcare system should do a better job embracing Indigenous health concepts and practices.
Pennington says this training should not only be taught in schools, but that this education should be continued throughout one's professional career.
It's something each and every healthcare provider has to be continually working on.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
A multi-million-dollar announcement has been made with the hopes of improving internet in Manitoba's north. Details on that and much more after the break. Welcome back. By the year 2030, the federal government wants to have every household in Canada to have access to high-speed internet. On Friday, they announced $38 million will be invested into northern Manitoba for the upgrade, most of which are Indigenous communities. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
In the middle of the Human Rights Museum, Dan Vandel, Minister responsible for economic development in the prairies, said high-speed internet connectivity is a human right.
For people in rural, northern, and isolated communities, dependable, high-speed internet can be life-changing.
It's why the feds are investing $38 million under the Universal Broadband Fund to connect over 3,600 homes in 14 rural communities in Manitoba's north, with 3,000 of those homes in First Nations, including Sapatoyak Cree Nation. Their chief, Nelson Janai, says his community's had big plans in telehealth and education for years, but because of its location, they've been crippled.
We had a vision of how to make it work. We had a lab service where x-ray would be done, where we'd be able to sit down with telehealth. But because of connectivity, we weren't able to do that. Back in 2007, we built the school to grade 12. Smart boards were there. But because of connectivity, we weren't able to access them. So now the opportunity is there.
Opportunity that also includes investing in Indigenous communities. David Muswagon is with Kichisipi Communications, a joint venture between Pimachikamak and Norway House. The business will provide services to the two First Nations and some of their neighbors.
This is a corporation that's going to be a new ISP service provider that's going to be competing with the Bells, the Shaws, and everything. We're not rolling out the red carpet for anybody. We're playing for keeps on this one because we want that economic power to be able to build a foundation for our people, create jobs, create training, and create revenue. So that way we can start getting our people off the social services system.
The plan is to have the 14 communities connected by January 2025. TR Weekly, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
2025 will mark the 35th anniversary of the term Two-Spirit. Was created to represent Indigenous peoples with fluid gender identities and sexualities. Today, a historic flag unveiling and documentary premiere took place in Winnipeg ahead of the anniversary. Reporter Sierra Bettens has more.
In 1990, Elder Mira Laramie introduced the term Two-Spirit at the 3rd Annual Intertribal Native American, First Nations, Gay and Lesbian American Conference in Winnipeg. It comes from the Anishinaabemowin term, Nijmanadoeg, describing a person with masculine and feminine characteristics. It helped Charlotte Nolan understand who she was.
When the term was coined here in Manitoba, I was sitting in the sweat lodge at the University of BC, and that's when I was told who I was.
On Tuesday at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, the International Day of Pink organization hosted a celebration to honor Two-Spirit history and resilience. The event kicked off with the unveiling of the world's first Two-Spirit pride flag. Patrick Hunter, a Two-Spirit Anishinaabe artist from Ontario, designed it. It features 2 eagle feathers, representing the balance of masculine and feminine spirits. They're framed by a sun and a rainbow of dots.
The sun, he kind of provides us with everything else that we need in this life. And I just felt like using dots instead of sort of like colorful bars would be cool because, you know, the earliest artwork that we see there out on pictographs out in the world are dots and circles. And I just thought what a throwback to, you know, 7 generations ago.
Brielle Beardy Linklater, a Two-Spirit activist from the Nisichawayasik Cree Nation, was featured in the documentary Reemergence, which premiered at the event.
We have a changing population, and we have so many young people today who know more about who they are, but they want the resources that go along with it, and I think this video will lead to those necessary changes.
The event was put on ahead of the Day of Pink, an annual anti-bullying and anti-homophobia event held on April 9th. The Day of Pink organization is now launching a Two-Spirit curriculum guide with free learning materials for teachers and students. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Still to come tonight, we'll take you to a job fair in Edmonton and have a preview of tonight's episode of Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. A late, unseasonably warm fall may officially be over. Yesterday, Dave Menzies captured this frost-covered leaf in southern Manitoba. Tomorrow, it might be buried under the snow. If you see some change in the weather, send your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 9 for Halifax and Fredericton. -1 in Kuujjuaq, snow and 3 in Nain. 9 above in Montreal, cloudy and 5 in Val-d'Or. 7 with showers in Sault Ste. Marie, rain and 5 in North Bay. Snow and +4 in Thunder Bay, flurries and 3 in Sioux Lookout. 4 in God's Lake, 2 with flurries in Norway House. +1 with snow in Winnipeg, -8 and flurries in Dauphin. 8 below and cloudy in Regina and Saskatoon. -9 in Meadow Lake, snow and -9 in La Ronge. Snow across much of northern Alberta, -17 in High Level, 14 below in Fort Chipewyan. Cloudy and 11 below in Edmonton, -2 in Lethbridge. 10 with showers in Vancouver, rain and 5 in Kamloops. -2 with snow in Prince George, 3 below and snow in Smithers. -18 and snow in Old Crow, 24 below in Beaver Creek. -23 in Yellowknife, sunny and -26 in Norman Wells. Flurries and -14 in Sax Harbor, snow and -15 in Paulatuck. Snow and 2 below in Chesterfield and Arviat. -14 with snow in Resolute, snow and -7 in Joe Haven. A huge 2-day career fair is wrapping up today in the West Edmonton Mall. It's offering a way to connect with dozens of Indigenous-owned businesses that are actively looking for workers. APTN's Chris Stewart was there.
Over 1,000 job seekers have walked through the West Edmonton Mall's Ice District Monday and Tuesday. Most are here to find jobs. Jobs that pay well and reward hard work. The Career Fair 2024 has been organized by the Tribal Chiefs Employment and Training Services Association, along with IndigiConnect. Both organizations are run by 6 Treaty 6 First Nations, and their goal is improving economic outlooks for Indigenous communities and their people, like offering a 2-day career fair in the second largest mall in North America to help people find jobs.
Opening up opportunities for meaningful employment to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, just giving them access to jobs to help them put food on the table, support their families, because in this day and age, times are tough.
Shannon Nest is here to find workers for Seven Lakes Oilfield Services. She says 61% of employees are Indigenous, and she wants that number to go higher.
We actually have hired all the way from Indigenous people from Nova Scotia into BC, Southern Alberta. A lot of our new employees are from Saskatchewan and Manitoba.
Neil Snedden works for Thomas Canada, a scaffolding and mechanical insulation company. He says they take people off the street with a little prior first aid and safety training.
We're always actively hiring. We have large projects in Kitimat. We got a big project in Saskatchewan with the BHP. We've partnered with George Gordon there. So we're always looking for people. Oil patch is never slow.
Brett Cardinal is here to find pipeline or oil field work. He's had 2 very productive meetings so far.
Most importantly, I like that it's Indigenous. It opens opportunity for Indigenous people that either didn't have any options and now given some options, which I think is amazing and great, right? Gives you a little bit of empowerment. Me personally, I'm here because I want to look at my own options. I want to see what I can do. I want to expand my skill set.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Navajo news anchor and journalist Charlie Edsity is our guest tonight on an all-new episode of Face to Face. In addition to her work on ABC 13 in Houston, Texas, she's also fronting the latest season of ABC's Reclaimed podcast series. The lifeblood of Navajo Nation looks at the century-long fight of the largest Indigenous nation in the U.S. to get running water.
Unfortunately, the Navajo Nation, this has been something that's been going on for decades. It's been a decades-long fight, but unfortunately, it's not unique to Navajo Nation. So many other Indigenous communities across the United States have their own issues and their own fights, and I really hope that people walk away with a better sense of what's happening in Native communities in 2024, and that they will educate themselves and, maybe look to their elected officials and ask those important questions about what are we doing to help out our Indigenous communities across the U.S.
And you can catch our entire interview with Charlie right here in less than 2 minutes' time. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. Creason will be here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for your first look at the day's news. And you can always stay up to date by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night.